Hello, I'm John Gooden, along with the outlaw Dan Hardy, and this is Unibet's Inside the Octagon, a brand new show that weighs up the biggest events in the UFC. And next up is Dillashaw versus Barao 2 at UFC 177.
TJ Dillashaw is facing in head and Barao, a champion that is elite at every level.
I get to prove the world that I'm a lot better than they think.
Oh! Big shot trying to finish. Barao on his back. It is all over. TJ Dillashaw is the new UFC bantamweight champion. Head Barao desperately wants revenge. He wants that belt back badly. What a moment. What an incredible moment.
All you have to do is believe, baby. Believe you're the best in the world and you'll get here.
What a great performance. And Dan, this is a huge rematch. In no small part, it's the Bantamweight Championship at stake. But these guys, no real needle, but there is a very much an athletic rivalry between them. Now, as a long-time fighter, someone that's challenged for a title and coached others, they're going into a rematch. What are the pros and cons of having seen one another before at such close quarters?
Well, the obvious advantage is that they already know each other very well. The work's done, the research is done, they've already done the training camp, so they're familiar with techniques that are tailored towards this opponent. But at the same time, we can't make assumptions based on the previous fight. Neither fighter can step into the octagon expecting his opponent to be the same as he was in the last fight. And really, that's the major disadvantage. Both fighters have got to evolve and bring something new. But for me, it's Barao that's got to make the biggest changes because he was the one that fell short in the last one.
OK, well, let's take a look at some of these statistics for both of these fighters. And there are the basic physical stats. We can see that Renan Barao, the now challenger, very much a bigger record, if you like. But these are the ones that are really interesting, Dan. The highest strike rates in bantamweight history from TJ Dillashaw. We saw his work rate, and that was really what earned him the victory in that fight.
It did. It really set him aside, not only from Renan Barao, but from the rest of the division. The work rate and the tenacity throughout the whole duration of the fight was something that we've not seen before at this weight class. And that's really going to be the main problem for Barao. He's got to deal with that tenacity and that accelerated work rate that he's not familiar with.
OK, well, we know that the devil is in the detail, Dan, so let's really break this down to the nuts and the bolts. TJ Dillashaw came firing out of the gate, had a fantastic first round, which maybe changed the complexion of that fight, and then managed to get a stoppage in the fifth. Probably the performance of the year so far, and one that's going to be very difficult for someone else to beat. Yeah,
no doubt. There are lots of factors going into this fight, but the thing that really stood out for me was the footwork of Dillashaw. As you can see here, he's very light on his toes. And that was what was able to disguise that big right hand that put Barao on the canvas in the first place. And that was the first round. So it wasn't like it was a one-sided beating. This fight went on for almost the duration, and this is the end right now. We see Dillashaw really pouring it on. Barao had all that time in between that first knockdown and the finish of the fight to adapt and evolve and deal with Dillashaw's style, which he didn't seem to do in that first fight. And partly I put that down to the fact that he's not really been challenged a great deal throughout his career. I mean, he's had this division on lockdown for a long time, and it's not been until now that he's had someone that's really come and pointed out the holes in his game.
Yeah, and for me, when I've watched back at this fight, I've really noticed some straight line movement from Barao.
Yeah, and that is something that we've seen in previous fights as well. It is a mistake that he makes consistently. He likes to pressure forward, and this is what we've seen consistently. But as you can see with this arrow that I've put in, you can see the natural movement of Barao. As soon as Dillashaw starts to move forward, his natural reaction is to go straight backwards. And this is what's exposing him. As he's moving back, he's extending his front arm out as a post, but his chin's up in the air because of that backwards movement. And as we can see with this fight here, I'm going to hit play right now so you can see what's going to happen. Dillashaw's going to wing that right over the top and crack him right on the chin and put him on the canvas. And we're going to see this here again with Barao pushing forward against Faber, and again Faber's stepping forward with that same technique. The difference with this one, not that he wasn't moving back because he's still making that same mistake, but he's also putting this front arm up to block, which is going to take some of the impact away.
Yeah.
As we push forward later on in this fight, we're going to actually see the same mistake again, emphasised a little more, and I have slowed it down just so you can see it. Faber's using that Dillashaw footwork very well, that movement, that alpha male footwork. But as soon as he starts to pressure forward, we start to see Barao doing the same thing he's always done in his fights, starts to move backwards and post that right hand. And with someone that commits to a right hand like Dillashaw, you can't do that.
Dillashaw is very, very crafty with his movement, very evolved in his movement. Got to ask the question, so how do you counter that?
Well, there are a few things that you can do. The main thing for me is to tighten up his footwork, to be pressuring forward, but to use those angles. We can see it in the Asuncao fight here. Asuncao was able to just step to the outside of Dillashaw's range, just the outside of his punches, and make him pay for overcommitting to those techniques. You can see here there's a low kick. Just make a mental note of that because I want to return to that in a second. But here, there's that big backhand uppercut that he commits to. And Asuncao's already moving. You can see the arrow at the side of the screen, and that will follow Asuncao's movement as he circles away from Dillashaw. And really, that was what stopped that combination from Dillashaw. Had that first punch landed, it may have been the end of the night. But with that lateral movement, it was able to redirect Dillashaw and have him and cause him to make a pause in his attack.
And another thing that Dillashaw had a lot of success with was the kicks. But in that Asuncao fight, we saw with this kind of movement and also his more smothering approach, Dillashaw couldn't get the torque in those kicks and they just weren't as successful at all.
Exactly. And the thing is with kicks, really to have the fullest extent of the power, you need to land them at their fullest range. And even that one that lands the first one, it was catching Asuncao on the chin, but he was too close to Dillashaw. He's crowding him, which means that then this starts to happen. As Dillashaw's throwing these kicks, the range is being closed too quickly, and Asuncao starting to catch that kick and making him pay for it. Something that we didn't see again in the Barao fight. Barao was just blocking those kicks. Sometimes he ate them, sometimes he caught them on his arm, but at no point did he discourage Dillashaw from throwing them. And really, I think that could have been a huge advantage in that fight had he have made him pay for throwing those kicks in the first place.
OK, well, on to the dangers of Barao. And one fight, if you like, that comes to mind straight away is the Eddie Wineland fight. He uses a lot of dynamic techniques. He did it against Brad Pickett as well. But the spinning kick techniques that Barao uses, when they hit their money, and he really can use them to good effect.
He can, and he is very, very good with them and very confident in it as well. We saw him use it a lot in the Dillashaw fight, but not to the same success that he did in the Wineland fight. Now, in the first round of the Wineland fight, you could see this movement was starting to frustrate him a little bit. He really was really struggling to pin Wineland down. And in this moment here, Wineland made just the briefest of mistakes that you can see in a second. The arrow will show the direction he's going to step slightly to his right. Now watch the expression on Barao's face. There's a smirk, he knows, it sets a trigger off in his brain, and he throws that kick. And Wineland is in the perfect spot to eat it right on the chin. Now that, for me, shows that Barao really likes his opponents moving towards his left. He likes them circling onto that back kick, and he likes them circling onto that left hook. Again, something that Dillashaw stole from him in the fight. We can see the arrow here. He's going to follow Dillashaw's movement. Every time Barao threw that kick, Dillashaw was circling to the outside of it. So it never landed cleanly. And it took a little while for Dillashaw to get comfortable in that range and comfortable with that footwork. But after a while, you start to see him start to punish Barao for it. As he throws that kick, he's seeing the opportunity. And this one here, this is a perfect example and a good comparison for the Wineland fight, because we can see that the heel is just missing Dillashaw here. Had Dillashaw been moving to his right, he might have been put to sleep with that. But because he was moving to his left, the kick went past him, and at the same time it exposes Barao, puts him on the fence, and Dillashaw's in control again.
Now, long-time fight fans will know that another way to slow down someone who's quite so active is to start chopping at the roots. Is that something that Barao should be looking to engage?
That's what I would be saying if I was his corner man. I've seen it in previous fights before. He's had success with it. And as you can see with this, just watch the feet of this. Watch how Dillashaw's moving in and out, constantly changing the range, making Barao guess, stopping him relaxing, stopping him getting comfortable in the fight. Now, if he starts using the low kicks, like I'm going to show you this Uriah Faber fight right now, you're going to see this low kick on Faber here. He does this a lot. He's done it against Jorgensen, he did it against Wineland to success, but didn't use it against Dillashaw. Now, if he's constantly got somebody circling towards that kick, you need to start chopping that down. If you've got an opponent that's on his bike, you've got to give him a flat tyre, and the flat tyre is the right leg low kick in this fight. And as you can see from here, after having landed that low kick, it's forcing Faber to circle back in the direction that Barao wants him to circle, and then he uncorks his big right hand, which is what puts him on the canvas in this one. He has lots of options if his opponent's moving in the right direction, but it does stifle him if he's moving the opposite way, and that is something that we've seen fairly consistently. See, a great performance there, but he just fell short a lot of the time in the Dillashaw fight, and I think it was very, very basic things that he needs to pick up on, and things that are more than within his capability, but he just didn't do on the night.
Yeah, but there's one other thing that we haven't considered here, and that's the mental side of the game. Renan Barao's just suffered, and very recently just suffered, the biggest defeat of his career, whereas TJ Dillashaw is flying high and just really has to press repeat.
He does. He just needs to prepare the same as he did before and show it with the same confidence that he did in the past. Barao's the one that needs to make the big changes. He's never really been beaten like that before, and that's a very, very telling factor, is what does a champion do with that? Do they become better or do they fade? And this is really what we're going to see from Barao now. I think he's going to make some big changes and come back strong.
Okay, well, thank you, Dan. Now you've seen all you need to know about the fighters. Don't forget you can bet on UFC 177 right now with Unibet. Head over to unibet.com for a comprehensive package of pre-fight and live odds ahead of Dillashaw versus Barao 2. Who will win? How long will the fight last? What will be the method of victory? All the odds are brought to you by Unibet, the official betting partner of the UFC. And there's much more at UFC 177 to be excited about, including 2 cracking lightweight bouts, Dan.
Yeah. I'm very excited about both of these. They could really shake up the division. Tony Ferguson is an interesting guy. He's very long and rangy, quite awkward. He's got a really stinging jab, which had a lot of success in this fight. And that sweeping left kick as well, we can't forget that. That's a big tool in this fight against Danny Castillo. Castillo's a gritty wrestler with big power in both his hands. Castillo's got to close the range in this fight. He's got to get his hands on Ferguson. He doesn't want to be caught on the outside having to deal with that range. So really it's about, can the wrestler get his hands on the striker, and can the striker keep that range against the wrestler? Ramsey Nijem, on the other hand, who knows what he's going to do. He's all over the place. He's a very exciting finisher, very aggressive and tenacious. He does like to take risks. He'll jump on a submission if he sees it. He will expose himself to try and get the finish. I mean, that's what's winning fights. Now, against this guy, it's going to be interesting. Ferreira is a tough guy to call because he's so unknown. We know he's unbeaten. This first outing in the UFC, he ran through Colton Smith so quickly, we didn't really see anything of what else he can do. A beautiful judo throw and a really nice rear naked choke with no hooks, which we don't see very often. But other than that, we don't know what he can do.
And some key UFC dates coming up. And after 177, we move on to 178 at the end of September, when Demetrius Johnson defends his flyweight title against Chris Carriasso. Plus, Conor McGregor is back in action. The next European event is in Stockholm on the 4th of October, when Gunnar Nelson headlines. And much further ahead, confirmation that John Jones and Daniel Cormier will finally get it on at the beginning of January at UFC 182. Some huge matches coming up, and a reminder that you can get all the pre-fight odds with Unibet, the official betting partner of the UFC. Thanks for joining us on Unibet's Inside the Octagon. Enjoy UFC 177, and Dan and I will see you again for more insight ahead of UFC 178. So goodbye for now.